2005. The 2004 tsunami affecting a large part of the Indian Ocean. A lesser-known Chinese earthquake, 2008. A Chile earthquake occurring in 2005. And finally, a BAM earthquake in 2003. BAM is in Iran, by the way. There are many examples of natural disasters throughout our world. Hurricanes, tsunamis, earthquakes. What I'd like to discuss is how government policy actually determines recovery from natural disasters. So let's zoom in on Chile versus BAM. Two earthquakes. While Chile experienced a much higher magnitude earthquake, BAM actually had much larger casualties. And according to Flores and Smith in their 2010 article, Surviving Disasters, quote, political institutions strongly influence the lethality of natural events. This is heartbreaking. What is this all about? So, ultimately, the resulting damage and death toll of a natural disaster is not solely dependent on the magnitude of the disaster, but rather on the government's intervention. Ultimately, democracies want to please the public and provide public welfare and goods and relief. On the other hand, autocracies strive to protect their small coalition and not provide public goods. So first I'd like to zoom in on the BAM versus Chile earthquake and discover what is this distinction about. And next I'd like to discuss how relief money from various countries plays into this distinction. And finally I'd like to discuss what this says about a leader's methods for staying in power. So, according to a book called The Dictator's Handbook, written in 2011 by Bueno de Mesquita and Smith, the BAM earthquake in 2003 was a 6.5 to 6.6 magnitude earthquake, killing 26,271 people and 97,000 residents. On the other hand, Chile in June 2005 had an earthquake of 7.9 on the Richter scale. In fact, that's 25 times larger than the BAM earthquake. However, only 11 people were killed out of 238,000 people. So Chile is a democracy, and therefore the money that they get is allocated towards seismic codes and public goods. Ultimately, it's for the public welfare, relief efforts. BAM, on the other hand, is a small autocratic country. Instead, money gets allocated towards the leader's small group of essentials, and not towards the public. That's an example of private goods. Furthermore, according to a 2004 Iranian studies group at MIT, the bad infrastructure and the bad building codes specifically contributed to the heavy damage in the BAM earthquake. So ultimately, what this comes down to is democracies versus autocracies, public goods versus private goods. Furthermore, I'd like to discuss how the Dictator's Handbook specifically discusses how Chile, for example, takes in public funds, relief money, and that money goes directly towards the damage, because it's bad if people die. On the other hand, in an autocratic country like BAM, it is actually good if people die. In fact, the country exaggerates the amount of damage done so that they can then get more money and siphon that towards a small coalition. It is no surprise then that in autocracies, many more people die than in democracies. Ultimately, foreign aid is actually more of a political move than anything else. But what does this really mean? It's good or bad if people die in various countries. So to illustrate that, one example is Katrina, something that hit home to us. According to a January 2006 Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report by the CDC, it was the deadliest hurricane since 1928, especially since it's located inconveniently below sea level. And according to the Dictator's Handbook, the handling of Hurricane Katrina was deemed ineffective and actually contributed to the loss of the Republicans in the 2006 and 2008 elections. So what does this mean? This means that in democracies, such as in America, it's bad if people die, because the leader needs to appeal towards the public, right? And if his image looks bad, it puts his tenure at jeopardy. On the other hand, the autocracies, they don't care about that. The dictator, the autocratic leader, just wants to exaggerate the damage, get more money. They want to use that towards their as private goods towards their essential group, and then that essential group will then support that leader, and he doesn't have to care about the public at large. So ultimately, we can see that this comes to maintaining power. And thus, it's not about the magnitude of the disaster, but rather about government intervention and policy. So yes, there's a distinction between Chile and BAM, and yes, aid money contributes to this distinction as well. And ultimately, it comes down to the leader and him wanting to maintain power. But what I'd like to conclude with is how the next time you see headlines, such as the one I showed on the PowerPoint, look and stop and look and think, what is this all about? Is this a democracy? Is this an autocracy? And ultimately, I'm challenging you to think like a political scientist. To think critically and determine what exactly is the cause of a certain death toll in one country versus another. What exactly accounts for this? And therefore, you can become just like a political scientist.
Okay.